Hello and welcome to episode number 10 of the Curling Legends podcast. My name's Kevin Palmer, and each week during the curling season, I share a conversation with a player or storyteller from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, 80s, or 90s, and we cover curling from the beginning of the slide through to the adoption of the free guard zone. Mike Riley is on the show today. First, I want to again thank you all for listening and remind you that you can rate us on iTunes and you can leave comments there, as well as on our webpage, curlinglegends.ca, or on our Facebook page, facebook.com/curlinglegends. And again, I want to remind you, you can get us on iTunes, on Stitcher, on any number of apps for your mobile phone that will play podcasts. And if you have a friend or family member that you think would like the show but isn't comfortable with technology, please take a moment to help them out and show them how to listen. I want to again thank Jerry Gertz of Curling Zone for his support of the podcast, as well as Steve Lobel, who provided the artwork, and Mark Rogman, who provides the music. Mike Riley isn't your atypical competitive curler from the 70s or 80s. Mike was someone who was able to focus intently on the game for a period of his life and actually find success, and just as easily step away from the game and explore other avenues of life, and then return to it, and despite not having spent the time and effort that many of his peers had, find immediate success once again. It was often quoted that Mike Riley could be gone to the Bahamas and fly back in time for the zone playdowns and immediately play well and win a spot in the Provincials. We'll talk about his early days learning to curl at the Heather Club in high school, and then his days as a young skip in men's, and then the opportunity he was given to play with Rod Hunter in the Brier in 1975. And then we dig into the team that he formed in 83 that went on to capture the Brier in 1984, a surprise upset, at least to others, against Ed Werenich and the dream team of Paul Savage, John Kawaja, and Neil Harrison. And in that game in particular, as well as a number of games that season, Mike took a strategy of coming around corner guards without last rock, something that was not common before and certainly not common since. But this aggressive style worked for the Riley Rink that season, and they captured a Brier, all of them seasoned veterans at the time. And we'll talk a bit about that strategy, how that came about. We'll also talk about a return to competitive form in 1995 when he teamed with a young Jon Mead, Hugh McFadyen, and Don Harvey, and took a run at the Manitoba Provincials, and then what happened after that. Please enjoy my conversation with Mike Riley. What was your kind of earliest beginnings in curling, and where did you start playing? Who got you interested in the game? What was the beginning for you?
Yeah, well, I remember first seeing it with my stepfather at the Granite Curling Club. Must have been the late 50s. He curled. It was, I guess, for that reason that I signed up to curl in high school. It was probably, I was trying to figure out, it was probably about 1959 or 60. I was 14 or 15. It was easy to sign up. Just a board at school that you signed up for, and the curling was at the Heather Curling Club in Winnipeg. So I just put my name on, and put my name down, and I was in. So it was really easy to get involved when it was, through the school level.
So you were familiar with the game before that, or you had some exposure to it even at a younger age, or not so much?
Not really, no. The only reason I signed up is because my stepfather did it.
Yeah.
I had been to a curling club. And also I knew Richard Howden was a good friend of mine, and his father had introduced him to curling at an earlier age, so he was able to kind of show me how to curl, or show me what you're supposed to do. But I don't remember any formal lessons ever. The way they do it these days with, they get somebody involved from the curling club who will teach young kids what to do, how to behave, how to slide, what's the etiquette of the game, all that stuff. We just kind of learned by the seat of our pants as we played. But I learned mostly through Richard Howden and his father, Dr. Howden.
And did you play other sports at the time? Were you involved in other activities? What was your interests in those teenage years?
I was in hockey, as most kids that age are. Hockey in the winter, and but I wasn't a very good hockey player, and kind of reached my level of incompetence fairly early, and that opened the door for curling because from the start I was pretty good at curling. So that, and like I say, it was easy to get involved at the Heather Curling Club, and then at the Grand Exchange Curling Club in Winnipeg. And as you know, in Winnipeg in those days, curling was a big deal. Most people did it. They had curling clubs at night had two draws, one at 6:45, and then another one at 9:15 at night. Two draws a night, and so I remember at the curling, or at the Heather Curling Club and at the Grand Exchange Curling Club, I remember those late Monday night draws that kind of set you up for being tired for the rest of the week.
As a high schooler, did you take to the game right away and start to play a lot and even practice and get really into it, or did it take time for your interest to evolve?
No, it took time. It was through high school. It was just curling with Richard Howden, and we had a high school league that every Friday at the Heather. So they designated the teams. It was mixed. There were girls and guys. So that made it a good social thing, but never really took it. Well, I guess it got to the serious level when we went into the high school Bonspiel. High school Bonspiel in Winnipeg used to start right after Christmas, Boxing Day, and it got so I looked forward to that more than I looked forward to Christmas. It was that was the time where you went in the high school Bonspiel and traveled to different curling clubs in Winnipeg, and there were hundreds of teams in it. So it was a big deal.
Yeah, do you remember how many teams were back in that era? So this would have been early 60s?
No, but I know it was hundreds, like maybe 200 or 300. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I bet you the MCA would have records about that.
It was literally like a junior MCA that happened, and I'm familiar with it. I played in it as well. So you actually won the, I guess in the Christmas Spiel, a lot of times it was called, right? The junior Christmas Spiel.
Yeah.
And so was that a point in time for you when you felt like, hey, maybe I've got some talent at this, and this might be for me?
Yeah, that was we never won anything, but I got the bug. I got pretty good at it, and I thought I probably thought I was better than I was at the time, but I knew that I liked the sport, and so that was what got me going.
I think that's a good trait to have when you're in juniors. I think it's good to think that you're better than you are. I think sometimes that can help.
Yeah,
I think right. a lot of juniors actually. I think because it's almost like the way to get better is to think you're almost that good. Although maybe not when you're calling shots. That's when you might have to think about it. So did you start? So you were playing on a team. At what point did you start skipping? When did that happen for you? Was that later?
Not until later. I played with Richard Howden, and then Dr. Howden took me into my first MCA Bonspiel. I think that was probably around 1962. He took his two sons and myself into the MCA Bonspiel. That was a revelation because, as you know, that used to be many hundreds of rinks. You know, the first one I curled in was 1962, and then in 1988, it was the, I think, 100th anniversary, and over 1,000 teams, and we won it. You know, many, many years later.
Oh, you guys won the, because I actually played in that. I remember as a junior, I played in the 100th anniversary, and I didn't recall that. You guys actually won the aggregate that year?
Yeah.
That's a pretty exciting year to win it, if you think about it. I mean, it was 10,000, I think it was 1,024 teams, yeah.
Yeah. Probably the biggest Bonspiel ever held and ever will be held. Yeah, and we won. So it was it was a big deal, but, you know, I went in it so many times. You know, if you're looking for records, all those old NCA books, you've probably seen them, that have records of all the trophies that they had and all the trophy winners, so on, going back to the early 1900s.
So as you were just in your junior stage, did you have any aspirations of, getting to a Canadians, going through the schoolboys, which I think was just starting at that time? Was that something you aspired to? Like, how competitive, I guess, did you start to sense you were at the game?
No, at that point, I would go out and watch. I would go out and watch. Like I remember watching Rick Boylan play in the schoolboys final in the early 60s, and so it gave me something to aspire to. But I never really thought that we could win or do anything or win a prize or anything in high school. But it was after that we went to junior curling level at the Grand Exchange Curling Club. They had a juniors league. Then I guess that's when I stepped up to skipping, and we started to win. We started to beat some men's teams, and that kind of whetted the appetite.
So while you were learning and absorbing, what were the aspects of the game that you appreciated? Like, what was your, I may be guessing a bit, but did you have a fascination with the strategy aspect? Was that something that really drew you, or was it, everything associated with it?
Well, like I recall taking the bus down to Strathcona Curling Club, because that's where all the good curlers played. That's where all the, Barry Fries and Bruce Hudsons, and they all seemed to come out of the Strathcona Curling Club, and it was kind of a dump in a bad area of Winnipeg, and they had the worst ice. And I believe that was the reason that they got all these good curlers out of there, because those guys would learn how to play on bad ice, and there was a lot of it at that time. Like there'd be, negative ice and dips in the ice and channels that you couldn't go down, and places where you had to take negative ice. I was fascinated with that because there were all kinds of probabilities and statistics that you could develop in your head that gave because there were a lot of misses, in a curling game. Now, nobody misses. You never see a wide open hit missed. But in those days, it happened all the time because you'd get a rock, you'd get a roll to a ridge where it was almost impossible to hit at, and where there's one side of the ice that you couldn't play on, and so it added a completely different dimension to the game because there were so many misses, and so you tended to play and wait for the misses.
And it's interesting. So you mentioned probability and statistics. Your background is finance, right? In terms of your education and where you built your career out of. And so was that a unique way of approaching or looking at the game at the time? When you were just coming out of junior, or did you sense that was a different thought process than others had, or was that kind of common in thinking the game that way?
Yeah, I think because my background was in engineering, an electrical engineer, and then an MBA. So I was taught to think in probabilities and in a scientific way. So that part of the game did fascinate me because in those days you didn't have the statistics that you do now. From Brier records, what are the probabilities of stealing and what are the probabilities of getting a deuce. Mm-hmm. But at that time, probabilities were more in how many misses were you likely to get? Because you could wait for the other team, especially on bad ice. You tended to get a lot of misses. You just waited for the misses and played the probabilities and tried to keep it simple. If you thought you had a better team. But if you thought that maybe the other team is a little bit better, you took a few more chances.
So you're moving into men's. You just mentioned you had, your education you're going through. How much did you stay close to the competitive side of the game? How much were you still curling at that time, just as you were entering the men's competition? What was happening in your early 20s?
I was becoming quite competitive, and we actually got into our first Manitoba Championship in 1966, so I was 21. And we got a picture in the paper of us pointing to a sign saying no minors allowed, and we got to play in the Manitoba Championship. We were the youngest team in it, and that really all of a sudden, my picture in the paper, and went away to Dauphin to curl in the consoles, it was called then, sponsored by McDonald's. that was really the beginning of my competitive career. From then on, curling became very important to me, and all winter I'd be sort of focused on that.
And did you focus on practice quite a bit as well?
Yeah, I did myself, but I never, I'd find a few guys to maybe go and practice with every once in a while, but I was often just going down by myself at the end of a draw, the heather. If the ice maker was a good one, or a nice guy, he'd let me on after the first game was finished, and I'd get to go and throw rocks. And so I did that, and sometimes I'd find buddies to do that with, and those were the guys that I ended up curling with.
So who was coming up at that time? Who were some of the names you remember and that were around your era that you were kind of close to or competed against?
Yeah, I remember, Rick Borland and Claire de Blonde and Omer Van Wellingham. They were the good teams at the Heather, but at the Granite or at Strathcona, there were guys that I looked up to, older than me. Bruce Hudson, Barry Fry. I wanted to be like them. So at that time, those were the big name teams. Hirsch Lerner was another one.
How did they interact with you when you were a young 21-year-old in your first consols? What was the interaction with some of those guys?
Well, I remember Max Scales. Max Scales was talking to somebody in the press, and he pointed over to me. He was getting on in his curling career, and he said, "Well, we don't have stars in our eyes like Mike Riley over there." But I do remember that Terry Bronstein actually knew my name, and that really gave me a thrill. He walked by me and he said, "Hi, Mike," and he was good that way. He was good at being friends with everybody and at recognizing young guys like me that were aspiring.
Well, and having lost the Brier final as a junior at such a young age, he probably had a lot in common with a lot of the young teams that would be coming up. He kind of lived that experience with some early success, right?
Yeah, I think so. So he knew what it felt like to be, have stars in your eyes and wanting to hit the big time. He did. He had been in the big time.
So that's 1966, and as you said, you got really focused on curling, but you were also getting an education, trying to build out a career. What started to happen then you get into your later 20s? What was the balance?
I always curled competitively and, wanted to get to the tankard at that time, the consoles. And we did several times, but we weren't really competitive. Like later on, guys like Burtnick and Stoughton came out at a young age, and they were really good at a young age. But I never was, or we never got that good a team together, or never worked that well. We'd come close, but never won.
So it wasn't from lack of trying then?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't because I was going to school and building a career. It was just we weren't good enough, and there was really nobody going at it, because I was just one of the many that curled as a recreation. I wanted to win. I was competitive, but didn't really spend the time at it that the guys do these days. The top teams these days, it's really a time dedication.
Did anyone take the Barry Fries and the other teams of that era, did they spend more time at it, or was it comparable in terms of most of the teams? I mean, it was a balance between the social aspect, work, everything else going on.
It was I think they were all comparable. There wasn't anybody that I recall that really went at it, really practiced and got four guys together that would really take it seriously. It was a recreation. Mm-hmm. It was a pastime, something you did in your spare time. It wasn't, there's no Olympics to aspire to. There was the Brier, which was really big. But
were you traveling at all and bonspieling much, or was it mostly locally and just within the Manitoba?
Mostly within Manitoba. Towards the late 70s, early 80s, we started traveling maybe to, like we went to the Edmonton Bonspiel once, we went to Regina a few times, but otherwise it was mostly Manitoba. And, but it was, it was most weekends up until Christmas that we'd go away to a Bonspiel. But it was the real serious curling to us started after Christmas when the playdown started, and the thing that really counted was getting into the Manitoba Championship.
Through that era, through the 70s, is there a game or two that you can look back at that was heartbreaking or heart-wrenching, something that even made you start to question your commitment to the game and the years that you'd spent? Were there moments and setbacks that really hit hard?
I certainly remember. I remember one in the NCAA Bonspiel playing against Don Duguid, Terry Brownstein playing third. And they were the team to beat, and we had them beat. All I had to do was hit and stick, and I didn't. And they ended up stealing the game, and that was heartbreaking and memorable. But looking back at it, the losses I always learned more from losing than from winning. Like when you'd win, you'd think that you deserved it. You'd sort of forget the lucky breaks you got. But when you lost, you remembered everything, or I did. I remembered all the shots and all the reasons why we lost. So I always learned more by losing than by winning.
So it wasn't a case, though, that you took it too hard, or it was just more that you would intellectualize it and think through it, or was it a combination at times?
I think in retrospect, I think I thought through it. It never discouraged me from playing the game. I always thought that I could be better. And I always thought that if I just got the right breaks at the right time, we could win more. But I never thought that the way you should think, I think, is that work at it harder, practice, you'll get better. I tend to think it was bad luck and I'll have better luck next time kind of thing. But I never considered quitting or anything. It was always going to be a pastime in Winnipeg in the winter. Curling was from being in Winnipeg. It was at that time it was a big thing and a way to meet people and have friends and be active in the wintertime. So,
keep you through those dark nights and those short days and 40 below weather for those many months. Yeah. There's a reason that Winnipeg's known for curling and music and a lot of other indoor activities. It's something you can get good at while you can't go outside, right?
Sure, exactly. If you didn't curl and I used to think if you didn't curl in Winnipeg, what in the winter, what else was there to do? I thought that way, so I never got discouraged with curling. It was always something I looked forward to. I looked forward to the winter for that reason.
So that 84 team, when did that team start? What was the beginning of forming that squad?
Well, I think or at least three of the four of us considered ourselves to be at the tail end of our careers. Bryan Toews and John Helston and myself. We'd been through curling wars, and it was, we all want to keep curling, but we don't really want to go at it that hard. So let's get together. We know that we can beat anybody. Let's get together and see what happens. Mm-hmm. As it turned out, I was the only one that had been in a Brier. I was in a Brier in 75.
Oh, that's right. You played with...
that was with Rod Hunter.
Oh, that's right. With Rod Hunter.
I was playing third.
Okay. So you'd been skipping just before that point and then got an offer to play with Rod?
Yeah, Rod had just won 2 world championships and he wanted to skip. That was fine with me. And in those years that I played with Rod, every year we were the favorites. We won 1 out of 3 years that we played together. But, and I remember that first Brier because sponsored by Export A cigarettes, and I was trying to quit smoking, and they had free cigarettes all over the place, and it wasn't the healthiest atmosphere in the world. Like curling in those days, I mean, they'd be ashtrays at the side of the sheet, sponsored by McDonald's tobacco. Mm-hmm. I remember Jack Wells at the Brier. He always used to go to the Briers, but he smoked DeMaurier cigarettes. But during the Brier week, he would buy his package of Demorier, but then he'd stick them in an old McDonald's Export A package and walk around with that during the Brier.
Did you manage to stay true to your commitment to quit, or did you have a couple of relapses during that Brier?
Oh, yeah. Well, I had relapses all the time. Yeah. It took me a long time to quit. I really never quit until probably the early 80s. Like Mark Twain said, quitting is easy. I did it many times.
So when you had that experience in 75, did it give you some encouragement to want to get back there? And even after the team with Rod split, were you as, had as much desire as ever to get back? Or at some point, like you were saying, as you started to age, maybe you started to feel like that was your chance? Did that start to happen?
No, I actually got, a couple of years later, I got dumped by Rod Hunter. He replaced me with Paul Devlin. And that kind of fired me up, because that meant that I was skipping again. Now I had something to prove. And, so that kind of strengthened me, that experience of, I wanted to keep curling third for Rod Hunter, but I got cut from the team and forced to build a new team, and I did. Over the next several years, we were competitive, came close, but didn't win until 84 or 83, the fall of 83. I met my wife in 1983, or to be my wife. Became a bit more relaxed about curling, and like I say, we ended up curling with Toews and Helston and Russ Wookey.
Was that team just formed that fall of 83, or you had played together with those guys at other times?
No, it was formed in the fall of, it was formed in the fall of 83. All of us were kind of at loose ends, but we wanted to curl. We didn't want to really go at it. We just wanted to start out, see how we did. And, but then that year we played in the Grand Aggregate Bonspiel at the beginning of the year in the fall of 83, and we qualified, and then we played Ed Werenich, who had won the Brier the year before, and we beat them.
I mean, that was a super team, right? They seemed unstoppable with that squad.
Super team. Yeah. That was the big team at that time.
With Kawaja playing second, Savage at third, and Harrison at lead, right?
And Neil Harrison at lead, and we played them in the fall of 83. When they were at their peak, they just won the Brier, and we beat them. That really made us realize, we can beat anybody. And we beat them twice more that year. We beat them twice in the Brier the next year.
Probably not a lot of teams that could make that claim at that time period that had that kind of record against them.
Well, that's right. Well, John Kawaja said nobody beats us twice. and then we beat them 3 times. So, it was just, we kind of played unconventional at that time, because when somebody put a corner guard up, most good teams would clear it off. But we went in behind it, even if we didn't have last rock. Like, even now I've heard Mike Harris on TV saying, "Oh, there's the Mike Riley strategy. Go in behind it instead of clearing it off."
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
That's what we decided to do. And Russ Wookey happened to be very good at doing that. He was playing lead. If we got up in a game, the other team would always put a corner guard out, and usually good teams would take it off. But instead, we would go in behind it. And my theory was, if you could get in behind, in front of the T line, that really cut down the area that you could draw to. So that's what we did, and usually after Russ had finished shooting, John had finished shooting, we were line 1 or 2. And so that made Bryan and my shot simpler and gave us more offensive shots.
So was that something you really devised that season, or is it something you'd used previously? Like, it sounds like you'd really thought through this as an approach.
Yeah, it's something that I tried before, but never really had the team that would buy into it. You need to do something like that. It was unconventional at the time, and to do something like that, you needed the other 3 guys to buy into it. And with this team, they did, because I think mainly because Russ is so good at doing it, at getting in the right spot. It seemed to work for us right at the start. So I think that kind of shocked Wernick's team when we would do that, because they're used to playing against the good teams that would clear it off. And we'd draw in behind. So then what do? You try to freeze up to it, or do you clear off the front? It was a different thing that they had to face.
Okay, so it wasn't a specific strategy that you formulated around the Brier specifically against Werenich. It was something you did game in, game out when you approached most teams. So it was, and it was a way to disrupt this standard approach that a lot of teams had. It probably took a few skips for a loop and maybe confused them a bit, as well as to, like you say, how do I approach this now? I'm in this position with hammer. My path is getting blocked off. My plan is being disrupted. So did anyone at some point start to catch on to how to tackle you guys in that? Like, how did different teams play you when you took that approach?
I think Burtnick kind of caught on. He was a younger team at the time, and all of a sudden they started to go in behind everything. Like they started to play really aggressive, and it paid off for them. So I don't know. You'd have to ask Kerry about that, but I think that they started to win by being more aggressive also.
Well, I remember, the stories around Burtnick's team often when I was coming up in junior was very first stand, if they had hammer and you put a rock an inch out of the rings, they'd come around it and they would try to go right at you right from the start. Whereas a lot of teams, even if they were more aggressive, might earlier in a game try to ease their way into it, look for their breaks as opposed to creating the opportunity. So did you, up until that point, were you known as a skip that played with a lot of rocks in play, or was this a shift for you?
No, I don't think we were known as it was a shift because I had a team that bought into it, bought into basically the theory was get in behind first, and at that time that good teams didn't do that. Especially if they got up, they'd hit everything, and as you probably know, that ended up resulting in the 4 rock rule, or not being allowed to hit rocks out in front. As ice conditions got better and teams got better, you could get 1 or 2 up and then just hit everything. But for us, we were a little bit looser because we also didn't want the game to be boring. It's more fun. It's called curling, so you should curl in behind rocks, So that's what we did. We tended to go in behind everything and try to get in first.
You were a collection of veterans, guys who maybe didn't have all these aspirations that season, and all of a sudden you took that approach. Let's enjoy the game. Let's use our strengths. And so you had a really magical season. Clearly wasn't something that you guys probably started off in that early spiel thinking, when this is all said and done, we're going to win the Canadian Championship.
No way. It was complete surprise to us. It was just kind of as I said before, as I have said, it was sort of the right guys in the right position at the right stage of their curling career. It was, we were loose and we weren't expected to win. We weren't the favorites, but we always just got in behind first. I think that gave us a jump on the good teams.
Do you remember what your seed was in the provincials that year in Manitoba?
Pardon?
Do you remember what seed you guys were in the provincials in Manitoba that year, like heading into provincials?
I think probably 5th or 6th.
Okay, so you were in the mix. You'd had a good season up to that point.
We were one of the 8 or 10 best teams, and because Brian Toews for years had been one of the best curlers in Manitoba. He played for Roy Weeb, but he threw last rocks. I remember Don Duguid saying Brian Toews was the best curler in Manitoba. He just didn't miss anything. He was into his 40s by the time that I played with him. But I remember when it came to the last rock of the Brier, we're playing Werenich in the final, and we're 3 up coming home or something, and then it comes down to Brian Toews has an out-turn hit to win the Brier. And I said to him before he went down, you're going to win the Brier with this one. It's easy to say because he hadn't missed an out-turn hit since 1955. He wasn't going to miss it. So I was able to say that to them without putting any pressure on them, kind of thing.
Yeah, seasoned veterans coming in and maybe low expectations for some who, weren't familiar with you guys outside of Manitoba or in the broader curling fan community, but people who were curlers, people who were competitive, certainly knew who you guys were. So heading into that final game, did you have a good sense, because you'd already, as you mentioned, you'd played Eddie a few times that year, you'd had some success, you'd had all of the years of experience building up to this, you'd grinded your way through that Manitoba experience and you'd learned the game. I'm suspecting you probably had more confidence in that game than probably most of the media or some of the casual fans did.
Oh yeah, for sure. We knew that we had a 50-50 chance of winning that game.
Mm-hmm.
You get down to any final, any Manitoba final or Brier final, that's the way I always felt. And the fact that we played them twice that year and beat them, we knew that you just keep doing the same thing. And also, I also remember the ice at that Brier. It was like a teepee. It was high in the middle. Mm-hmm. So it suited our game of coming in behind corner rocks, because those are the only rocks that we could get in behind. Coming around to the center was almost impossible. So that kind of suited our game. Eddie
loved playing the corner guard game, so ultimately you knew you were going to get corner guards to play with. He wasn't going to shy away from that.
Yeah, every end he put up a corner guard and we'd go in behind it. They at that time, I remember watching the Brier film after the replay, and they would switch to ads during the between ends, so they'd miss the leads first, one or two rocks. But then when they came back to the game, we'd always be lying one or two, because Russ had just finished shooting. He put a corner guard in behind, and they'd have to do something else, and so we'd be sitting pretty after he finished, just because of that, his ability to get in behind first with the right weight.
Do you think Ed got a bit frustrated? At that point, Werenich, with that team in particular, was known as a real mind for the game. And it really seemed as if you outsmarted him a little, and certainly that season, it sounded like you kind of had his number. It seemed like maybe, was it he wasn't able to adjust in time, or he was very stubborn about beating you at that game? Did you have a sense of where he was at as that season went on, and that game in particular?
Well, I mean, they got to the Brier final, so you can't say that and they beat everybody at that time in Canada. Maybe our approach might have been different than most of the teams he played. Like, even after we got up 1 or 2 in that game, we kept coming around the corner guards. Other teams would have tried to clear them, and eventually they hit one right on the nose, and then Werenich could go around. But in our case, we would try to get around first. That seemed to work for us against them. But, like I say, on really good ice, it might not have worked, because he would have been more likely to make an angle freeze or come around a middle rock, which they were really good at doing. But that ice and that Brier was not suited to doing that.
Just for some reason, I'm imagining Eddie and his little chuckle and maybe muttering under his breath and wondering when he was going to be able to get you to stop doing that. And I don't know, maybe it did frustrate him a little. And then obviously once he's down, I mean, he doesn't really have another option as well. He's got to start playing into that game. And certainly they felt like, and rightly so, that they were the best in the world at playing that game. So pretty amazing year then, for sure. And you guys, at some point, probably had to keep pinching each other to say, yeah, this, really happened. I mean, again, not doubting faith in your abilities, but certainly your age, your commitment to the game, and also recognizing that you guys hadn't even been a team for very long either. So it's pretty amazing how you came together quite quickly.
Yeah, it was our first year together. Yeah.
So after that, was there still sort of a commitment to say, we're at this stage in our careers, we're not going to, travel nationally and go to a lot of events, we're still going to balance curling with our lives? Or was there some pull to maybe ramp it up a bit the year following?
No, I think, we got to go because we're Canadian champions. We got to go to Scotland and to Switzerland. We took full advantage of that. We enjoyed the next year, but probably enjoyed it too much because we didn't win much the next year. We had a really bad year. We got beat by everybody. Maybe just relaxing a bit or starting to think we should win. I don't know.
You were able to bounce back the year after that and make a return to the Brier.
Yeah.
A couple years older, but clearly, so that was a somewhat better season for you. And you, like you say, maybe you had a bit of a hangover in '85, possibly.
Yeah. But also, the fire wasn't there. Like I say, towards the end of our curling careers, okay, well, we won the Brier. It would have been nice to win the world, but after the Brier, the world didn't seem like that big a deal. Like the Brier was in Victoria, it was beautiful, it was the arena was packed, but then the Silver Broom at that time was the last Silver Broom, I think. It was in Duluth and there was nobody there.
Mm-hmm. And it was a drive. Did you guys fly or did you just bus it down?
Pardon?
Did you fly down or did you actually end up just, because, I mean, that's just a drive from Winnipeg as well, right, if you wanted to?
No, we just drove.
Yeah.
We drove, yeah. Our trips were the year before when we were Canadian champs. We did get to go to Europe a few times, but
so Duluth almost felt like a it almost felt a little like a Bonspiel. It probably didn't feel like, obviously you recognize it's a world championship, but it didn't have the same scope and scale. It didn't and feel as if you were flying internationally, going to something where it was packed houses and that type of thing. Yeah.
By that time of the year, we were curled out, and it's not like we were playing to get in the Olympics or anything like that. It's just, but one thing I remember at the end of the Silver Broom, all the other teams, were talking to each other and shaking hands. Well, and some of them were saying, "Okay, well, we'll see you next year." Mm-hmm. And we're sitting there realizing our chances of getting back next year are pretty slim. But all these teams from Europe, they all had a good chance of getting back there next year.
Well, I mean, you got back to the Brier in '86, and that was the same team, right? Mm-hmm. The same squad?
No, John Helston had gone. He took a job in Saudi Arabia, and so we replaced him with Terry Henry.
So moving into that Brier, did you have the same sense that you were playing well going into it? Did you feel confident, or was there a bit of a different feeling that season then?
Yeah, maybe it was a different feeling because we were one of the favorites in '86 because we had won in '84. In '84 we weren't a favorite, but we knew that we were good. We knew we could beat anybody. In '86 we were one of the favorites, and maybe there was a thought of maybe we should win this, and it was a different feeling, and we didn't do as well. I don't know if that was psychological or what, but it wasn't. It was not the same feeling.
Now, then after that, Brier, did you almost step a bit back from the game at all, or were you still playing a little socially? Like when I recall sort of coming up through the late 80s and juniors, if I recall correctly, you almost were stepped out of the competitive limelight a little bit, didn't you?
Yeah. I met my wife, and we decided we wanted to go on adventures. We did things like paddled a canoe from Winnipeg to Ottawa, and paddled a canoe down the Mackenzie River, and we went sailing in the Caribbean, and we started to do adventures, and curling just kind of drifted away as something that it wasn't all consuming anymore.
And that's a bit uncommon. I mean, when you look at a lot of the competitive landscape over that era, you had people that grew up in the game and they played it, and that literally consumed a lot of their time. I think there's, you'd say that was an anomaly of your peers probably, right? Someone that at your level who'd reached that level that just stepped away. Did it seem odd to some of your, a lot of your friends and people in the game? Or they just sort of knew that, hey, that's Mike? And
yeah, I think it must have seemed kind of odd. I remember Mark Olson said, "Oh, geez, Mike Riley goes away sailing, and then he comes back and he still curls well." Where other people were starting to put time into it. The Burtnick team and Stoughton team were the two most obvious, and they were better than I ever was at that age. And I guess I realized that in 1995, that was my last year, even though I had a really good team. I had Jon Mead and Hugh McFadyen and Don Harvey. We had a really good team, but the desire was not there. They were building careers now. I was kind of fading out. And I remember losing to both Stoughton and Burtnick in 95 in the Manitoba Championships. And I realized, I don't have the heart to be competitive anymore. So that's when I quit.
Well, and that team, I remember that season and that team, though I was living in Toronto at the time, I knew the story of it. Now, and you guys had just formed that team that season again, correct? Like you were the grizzled veteran, and that was, were you right out of retirement that season, or had you played a little bit prior to that then?
Yeah, I hadn't curled for the last year or year and a half. I missed 93, 94, I think. And Jon Mead, or Don Harvey actually, phoned me and said, come and skip us. And I knew those guys were good. I didn't realize how good they were until I curled with them that year. They were, and actually I remember after when I decided that's it for me, the end of 95, I phoned Jeff Stoughton and I said, you should be curling with Jon Mead. He's the best curler I've ever played with. And a couple of years later, he was. They were curling together.
Yep. Yeah, and it had a lot of success. And then Jon, similar to you, I mean, Jon had that sort of devastating loss in the Olympic trials and then really took a step away from the game. And then really it came back to it. Now, in Jon's case, I think he was a bit younger when he took that step back. I think, part of your challenge is when you took that step back, you'd already had your Brier success in your 40s. So at that point, it's becoming a young man's game. Glenn Howard notwithstanding, as he continues the battle. But at some point, I'm sure it does get hard to make that commitment. And I think you're right. The more these teams commit more time and more effort, I think it gets harder and harder for the grizzled veterans. But I think there's always place for one or two of them around. And that was your season. It would have been a great story, I think, if you guys had won the Provincials that year. Because you guys, now you lost the final, or how did that Provincials end up?
Oh, we lost to Dave. The guy who finally won.
Oh, Dave Smith?
Dave Smith, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we lost, I think, going into the semifinal.
Okay.
But yeah, like I said, I didn't realize until then what a good team that was. They were, but also I remember missing some key shots myself. So I figured I just turned them loose. So I did. They should be going at it because they agreed at the beginning of the year that we're not really going to go at it because McFadyen was building a career. Well, all three of them were, but because they were so good and that we made it in, we made it almost to the finals. But it was time for me. And then by that time, Janet and I had bought a sailboat. We wanted to go sailing, and we weren't going to be in Winnipeg in the wintertime if we were to do that. So it was time. So
did you play the game much since then? You never really took a run at the seniors, I think, did you? Or did you ever have any teams together? Or?
No, I never, after the last rocks I threw were in the Manitoba playdowns.
Really? In 1995?
I don't remember.
In that season?
Yeah, I didn't. I remember about 10 years later having to curl a curling game because my niece was having a party and I had to curl. But by that time, I'd taken up running. I was, my legs were fat and strong, but I could barely get down in the hack.
Mm-hmm.
So I really haven't thrown a rock since 1995.
Wow. Did you feel at peace with that? You really able to, so for something that you were so passionate about, took up at such a young age, really, were driven to succeed at for a good portion of those early years. It sounds like you were still very good with it and felt at ease. It wasn't something that you struggled with over that time period.
Yeah. I guess the bottom line was I met my wife. And we decided to go on these adventures, and the adventures meant that we wouldn't be in Winnipeg for most of the winter.
Most people would envy that, I think, Mike, and those opportunities, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, yeah, like I had spent my whole time when I wasn't curling investing and borrowing to invest. So we didn't have any kids, didn't have a family, didn't really want one. So if we're not going to have kids and we can afford it, why not do other things? Like, why not go sailing in the Caribbean? So that's what we did.
Yeah. Do you watch the game now? I mean, do you still follow it as a fan?
Oh, love watching it now. I love watching it now because they're so good. These guys are so good. And the conditions are so good. Like when we try to raise hit, we were just trying to hit the rock in the house. Now they're trying to raise hits and deciding where they want to roll to in the house. It's nobody misses anything. The conditions are perfect. All the ice is the same. You can come in behind center rocks all the time, and there's no crud on the ice. There's no garbage, and the conditions are perfect. Sometimes I think it's too easy. You don't see any misses. It's very predictable at the beginning. You pile up. They call these. They freeze down to rocks in front of the tee line. We never did that. And then they wait for the angles and hope that the angles aren't going to work out at the end of the end. It's really different. And the players are really good. All of them. The leads and the seconds are all good. When we used to play, often you'd find a weak spot playing lead or second. And you could count on misses, but not now.
Yeah, I think in this current era, it isn't as often that a skip will say to his third, well, I know that their second does this with his out turn, so we'll try to take advantage of it. They all throw it so clean and they're so consistent that it's hard to find actual deficiencies. So it almost becomes a different game of taking advantage of the two half shots that you might get in a game versus, having multiple opportunities in a game.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how four rock has almost now become a challenge and become repetitive. And I've seen, the advent of five rock, to me, it seems like another step in the game that it might have to take. I mean, recalling the Brier last year, especially on the weekend when the conditions were really consistent, there was a lot of blank ends and a lot of teams started to play the ends very similar. So it was, they started to look the same. And even though there was a handful of rocks in play, so it wasn't the late 80s, early 90s and that experience, but it was still, the word boring started to almost come to people's lips at the event because of their capabilities. Yeah. I would always argue, if you make a double takeout and roll away to blank an end, that's still an exciting blank. But to some, I think some fans still want to see some scoring. Great. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you, Mike, that you wanted to share, or anything that I could ask you about?
No, I certainly agree with you that the game can be boring to watch, but it comes across so well on TV. The teams are well coached and they don't call a shot unless everybody buys into it. It's not like the skip is a dictator, which was the case, or used to be the case.
Any examples of that, Mike? Do you even think back, maybe you were a bit of a dictator, or were you one that tried to get consensus?
Yeah, I think in before I met these four guys that bought into my strategy, I think I was kind of a dictator. Just, this is the way it is. Come here. But, I regret some of that. I wish that we'd had a coach or somebody else who had to take responsibility for getting people to buy into the shots. But you see that now on TV. It comes across so well on TV, and you see that they don't play a shot unless they all agree. And I think that has led to a game of perfect. The game's almost too easy out there. It looks too easy. But maybe they'll change the sweeping rule, or something will change. But I think something does need to change in order for it not to be so easy.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's tricky, right? Because we want to see, in any sport, you want to see the best compete at the highest level. But curling's an interesting sport where, over its evolution, the better the players got, the better the conditions got, the actual dynamics of the game change. It's and one of the examples might be tennis, right? Where tennis rackets got to be more advanced, and the ability for serves got to be such high speed that on certain conditions, all of a sudden it became just a serving competition, and all of a sudden it lacks some of the creativity and the imagination of the wooden racket. So I think it'll continue to evolve. I think it's in a healthy spot, and I agree. These guys and girls are phenomenal, and I think if you'd been if you were a bit younger and you'd come up through some of this era, I absolutely expect, Mike, that you'd be one of those people that might be committing more time to the game. And who knows, maybe that would change your path in life, and maybe not for the better. You never know.
Yeah, that's exactly true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was great talking to you, and I hope you enjoyed it. And thanks again.
Yeah. No, I did, Kevin, and glad to see somebody like you with the writing skills paying attention to our sports. That makes me feel good.